Fighting COVID-19 at Purdue University, Design and Evaluation of a Game for Teaching COVID-19 Hygienic Best Practices. COVID-19 has upended lives everywhere, but there exist gaps in both knowledge and protective behaviors. To mitigate the spread of the disease, we developed a game that teaches hygienic best practices for preventing COVID-19 after consulting professional game designers, health experts, and educational technology designers. This work was supported by Purdue University through a Protect Purdue faculty grant. We compared the effectiveness of the game to an equivalent video in 2 studies and found that game-based learning can be an effective approach for teaching COVID-19 hygienic knowledge, improving COVID-19 hygienic self-efficacy, and fostering COVID-19 hygienic positive attitudes. We also found that game-based learning is more intrinsically motivating than video-based learning. Let's watch how the game is played in the beginning.
Good morning and welcome to Fighting COVID-19 at Purdue University. You look like an expert at wearing a mask. Do you mind helping me show some of the other students proper mask usage? Help these students wear their masks properly. When your mouth is not completely covered, the mask becomes ineffective.
The goal of the game is to teach critical COVID-19 knowledge and best practices. The game is set in a virtual university computer lab. The development team consisted of 2 lab teaching assistants, 2 game designers, 2 health science experts, and 1 educational technology designer. We had 7 major iterations in which all team members provided input on increasingly complex versions of the game, with dozens of minor iterations in which individual subsets of the team discussed how best to proceed. For development, we first decided on which knowledge to teach. We then developed a storyboard and used a highly compressive, agile software development process. New prototypes were presented every few days and feedback was given. The game has a vector art style and it was made with Construct 3, an HTML5-based 2D game editor, to maximize portability. The game features RPG dungeon crawler style mechanics with point and click for navigation and interaction. The game is playable in any modern browser, and it can be played on both mobile and desktop devices. The challenges of the game include mask wearing, social distancing, disinfecting a workstation, COVID-19 symptoms and quarantining, and hand washing. Next, let's watch the first part of the video.
Good morning and welcome to Fighting COVID-19 at Purdue University. First, we are going to look at proper mask usage. When your mouth is not completely covered, the mask becomes ineffective. With your nose exposed, the mask also becomes ineffective.
We wanted the video to be as similar as possible to the game in terms of instructional content and quality. A professional instructional designer first became familiar with the game by documenting the content in the game. To maintain similarity, we decided to use existing graphics, animations, and audio from the game to develop the video. As with the game, the video was iterated on several times with feedback from the team. Although our initial goal was to create a video of similar length to the game, which takes about 10 to 15 minutes to complete, we decided that such a video would contain such a large amount of filler material that it would be ineffective. For the inherent modality of the video format, we decided on a short 3-minute video that would be instructionally effective. We wanted to ensure that the game and the video contained the same content and that they were of the same quality for their respective modalities. And this was confirmed by both health experts and online participants. The goal of the first experiment was to explore how the game versus the video affected students' COVID-19 knowledge, sanitizing self-efficacy, anxiety, attitudes and beliefs, and workstation cleaning behavior. The experiment was set in a classroom lab over the course of 3 weeks. For the game, the participants had to play it from beginning to end, and for the video, the participants had to watch it from beginning to end. The experiment was integrated into regularly scheduled lab sessions, increasing ecological validity. In week 1, we administered a pre-test, intervention, and a post-test 1. In week 2, a post-test 2 was administered. And finally, in week 3, a post-test 3 was administered. We had a total of 11 participants who were college students. We used the following measures, which were all taken or adapted from relevant existing studies. The first measure was Public Health COVID-19 Knowledge, PHCK, which assessed participants' general COVID-19 knowledge. The second measure was Shared Workspace COVID-19 Knowledge, SWCK, which assessed COVID-19 knowledge specifically with respect to shared workspaces. The third measure was COVID-19 Hygienic Workstation Self-Efficacy, and the fourth measure was COVID-19 Anxiety Scale. The fifth measure was COVID-19 Positive Hygienic Attitude, and next we had the Intrinsic Motivation Inventory, IMI, which assesses intrinsic motivation relating to a specific activity. The seventh measure was the Player Experience Inventory, PXI, which measured player experience at 2 levels, psychosocial consequences, such as immersion, and functional consequences, such as progress feedback. The eighth measure was the Video Engagement Scale, VES, which measured engagement with the video. Finally, the ninth measure was cleaning behavior. We measured actual cleaning behavior during each lab session, which was video recorded. The rubric contained 5 categories: cleaning before use, face mask wearing, absence of eyes, nose, or mouth touching, cleaning after use, and total cleaning time. 2 of the authors created a rubric for coding cleaning behavior. This rubric was then iteratively refined through feedback from the 2 health science experts on the team. Coding was then performed independently by the same authors who created the rubric, blind to the condition. After each iteration of independent coding, the 2 authors came together to discuss any differences in coding, and the videos are again independently coded. This process was repeated until consensus was reached. In total, 28 videos are coded with 6 full iterations of coding. And here are the results of Experiment 1. For PHCK, participants scored similarly in the pre-test, and both groups improved in their scores in the post-test. For SWCK, participants scored similarly in the pre-test and greatly improved in their scores in the post-test. For Hygienic Workstation Self-Efficacy, participants scored similarly in the pre-test and improved in their scores in the post-test. The participants belonging to the game condition maintained their scores through weeks 2 and 3 of the experiment, while a gradual decline in the scores was observed for the participants belonging to the video condition. For anxiety, participants in general did not differ in their scores regardless of time. For positive hygienic attitude, participants in both conditions had similar scores at pre-test, and we saw a marginal improvement in their mean attitude score over time. For the IMI, the largest difference between the conditions was found in the subscale of interest and enjoyment, with its scores being higher for the game than for the video. Looking at the PXI and VES, we see that most subscales of the PXI are positive, except for autonomy and challenge. Therefore, the player experience was overall a positive one on most dimensions, although the game was on the slightly easier side and provided few choices. For the VES, we see a positive score for attention, but below neutral scores for emotions and going into a narrative world. This made sense since the video was mainly informational and not a story. For cleaning behavior, we wanted to measure if participants spontaneously sanitized their workstations before and after use. Therefore, no prompts to clean the workstation were given at any time throughout the study. The figure shows how participants performed in each category over time. Because of the small sample size, we limit our analysis to describing descriptive results. In week 1, there do not appear to be large differences between the game and video condition. Both groups have a consistently high face mask wearing score. This is expected since wearing masks is required while indoors inside the university. However, we see low scores on absence of face touching for both groups for the duration of the experiment. In week 1, we were interested in whether participants spontaneously sanitized their workstations before they received the intervention. However, both groups scored similarly low on clean before use, indicating that they did not sanitize their workstations before use. After the intervention, participants in the game condition improved slightly in clean before use in weeks 2 and 3. Other constructs remained mostly similar for the duration of the experiment for participants in the game condition. Interestingly, participants in the video condition appear to do worse in clean after use and total cleaning time in weeks 2 and 3, which may signal that any positive effects from the video on cleaning behavior were brief. Our second study aimed at obtaining a larger sample size for obtaining more statistically relevant results. We did a pre-test, intervention, and post-test in week 1. Then, a single delayed post-test 2 was administered in week 3. No actual cleaning behavior during the study was captured for the online study, and we used Amazon Mechanical Turk, which is considered a reliable tool for running research studies. We recruited a total of 475 participants. Again, the same measures were used for experiment 2, except for the cleaning behavior. Participants in both game and video conditions improved their PHCK and SWCK scores. Participants in both conditions improved in hygienic self-efficacy, but there were no differences for anxiety between conditions or across time. Participants in both game and video conditions improved in positive hygienic attitude. The interest and enjoyment subscale of the IMI is considered a subscale that measures intrinsic motivation. We find that participants in the game condition rated the task as more intrinsically motivating than participants in the video condition. Looking at the PXI and VES, we observe positive scores on all subscales of the PXI, indicating an overall positive player experience. The scores for the subscale autonomy and challenge hovered around 0, which mirrors the results from the in-person study. For the VES, we see a higher score for attention and a slightly lower score for emotion and going into a narrative world, also mirroring the results from the in-person study. We observed a consistent increase in COVID-19 hygienic self-efficacy, COVID-19 knowledge, and COVID-19 positive hygienic attitudes for both game and video. The participants in the game condition experienced higher intrinsic motivation. COVID-19 anxiety scores were not affected by either game or video. Shared workspace COVID-19 knowledge scores were higher for in-person participants across both pre-tests and post-tests. The in-person participants, students, likely had better pre-existing training. For example, the university frequently distributed information through emails and video announcements. Also, they likely found the instruction more relevant to their current situation, and they may have paid more attention. Digital interventions such as these are scalable and can be quickly deployed. They may also be an effective alternative to delivering in-person interventions. For the in-person study, we had a small sample size due to low attendance during the pandemic. As a result, we reported the in-person results descriptively rather than using statistical tests. Also, the Hawthorne effect may have played a role. The participants may have an influence because they knew that they were being observed through the video recording device. On the other hand, the online study was less ecologically valid because learning material may have been less relevant. For example, those who work from home do not need to sanitize public workstations. Also, their cleaning behavior could not be observed. Finally, many of the scales used in the study were adapted or developed from previous existing scales. Although these scales show good reliability, they may not be as robust as other established scales. A rapidly changing pandemic makes using robust, psychometrically validated scales difficult, as such scales take time to develop and empirically test. Participants in both the game and video conditions have a sustained rise in COVID-19 hygienic self-efficacy, positive hygienic attitudes, and knowledge. Neither of the two conditions had any change in COVID-19 anxiety. We find that the game is more intrinsically motivating than the video. Therefore, game-based learning can be an effective approach for teaching COVID-19 hygienic knowledge, for improving COVID-19 hygienic self-efficacy, and for fostering COVID-19 hygienic positive attitudes, and is more intrinsically motivating than video-based learning. The game is, to the best of our knowledge, the first to take a multifaceted approach through teaching both personal and environmental hygienic best practices.